Hello, and welcome to today's Information Week webinar, Ditch ITSM Complexity with AI and No Code. It's sponsored by Team Dynamics and broadcast by Informa Tech Target. I'm Peter Krass with Information Week, and I'll be your moderator today. In this session, we're going to explore how modern ITSM strategies can streamline operations, reduce manual workloads, and improve service delivery across departments. Also, you're going to hear firsthand how the South Carolina Department of Commerce approached modernization. And they went all the way from identifying key pain points to implementing automation and even all the way to driving measurable results. All right, so that's what we're going to do. And on that note, I'm happy to introduce our four speakers. Today, we're joined by Doug Foster. Doug is the CIO, Chief Information Officer at the South Carolina Department of Commerce. Bill Clayman is a well-known industry analyst. Andrew Graff is the Chief Product Officer at Team Dynamics. And Kaylee Belda is the AVP for Pre-Sales, also at Team Dynamics. Thank you all for joining us. Great group today. Now, before I hand things over to our speakers, I have just a couple of quick reminders and announcements for our audience. This webinar is designed to be interactive. And what that means is that at the top of your screen, you'll find some buttons, and you can click on those to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media, and ask a question for our Q&A, which we'll have toward the end of the presentation. Also, you can use that Q&A area if you have any technical issues. You can't hear, the slides aren't advancing, whatever it is, use that, let us know, and our team will be happy to help with one-on-one assistance. And that's it. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew. So Andrew, take it away.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad Doug's here and Bill. I think we're going to have a great conversation today. And this is going to be interactive, like we talked about. So we'll have some questions really to help us frame the conversation for the audience. So today we're going to talk a lot about how are no code and AI and automation impacting service management in general. And if you're not familiar with Team Dynamics, I'll give you a brief overview. We're an AI-powered, no-code enterprise service management platform, including IT service management. And we really focus on bringing a purpose-built AI and automation layer to help drive efficiencies throughout the organization, any kind of service function. And we have clients across 25 different industries, all different stages of their maturity. So work across lots of industries. We'll get a demo a little bit later to reinforce some of the points that we've talked about throughout the call today. So we're going to kick it off with a survey question. So where are you on your service management modernization journey? So are you just kind of getting started? Do you feel like you're fairly mature? Do you think that you're advanced in relation to your peers? Take a moment and just respond so we can add this to part of the conversation.
Andrew, I'm smiling at this because I remember this survey question coming down later and later, and I don't think we ever really get it right, and I'm always pleasantly surprised by the audience that are coming in and just telling us where they are in this modernization journey. I'm curious, and like Andrew said, don't be shy. Throw in a question or a comment. We're going to have some time at the end to answer some of this, but holy cow, hopefully you're on your modernization journey and you're feeling much more comfortable about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see what people have had to say here. So it looks like most people consider themselves to be foundational. I'm not really surprised by that, honestly. I think that there's so much going on in the space. It's hard for anyone to call themselves mature anymore, especially with advances in AI and automation technologies. So, I mean, Doug, does this surprise you, this result?
No, not a bit. I was sitting here trying to remember what I had answered to this question, but I think foundational, to your point, the technology is advancing so quickly. I think a lot of people feel like we're all in sort of catch-up mode at this point. So no, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Bill, how about you?
I think I'm just grateful that people are modernizing. I'm completely fine with people being in the foundational part of it. I'm grateful that 15% of the respondents came back and saying, hey, we've got some level of maturity. But what's really exciting about this, Andrew and Doug, is that the foundational folks have the most ability to mold themselves into what they actually need in this industry. Good job for getting started. I'm really proud of you for taking the step. This next course of conversation is going to help you go from that foundational aspect to understand the power of this stuff and what you can actually do with it. So this is, it's a great start.
Yeah, I agree. So I think where we start, let's start with a foundation of enterprise service management. I know that Doug, your organization's made a lot of strides here, and enterprise service management is the umbrella across all functions of organizations to provide service to internal, external customers. ITSM is a piece of that. So when we think about enterprise service management, think about your facilities groups, human resources, marketing, legal, procurement, whatever those groups are. Most of them are a service organization of some shape or form. What we have found with enterprise service management, in order for it to succeed from a technology perspective anyway, there's a couple things that need to be in place. And we learned these lessons years and years ago. The first is that it has to be really simple to own and operate. The last thing most IT groups want is something else to manage and take care of. So those departments need to be able to add a field to a form. They need to be able to change a workflow. They need to be able to do most of the things that they would need to deliver service in their area, or it's just going to fall flat because IT doesn't have the resources to manage yet another thing in full. The other component is making sure that these non-IT groups have support for their language and processes. Trying to force a marketing group to use the term incident is very difficult, or an HR group to use problem when they use case, or facilities to use incident when they have work orders, right? It has to mold. So Doug, do you want to talk a little bit about your enterprise service management journey? I know HR has been a real bright spot for Department of Commerce.
Yeah, it was a really interesting journey for us. We went about this a little backwards. We started with sort of a portfolio management process and moved to ESM and then to ITSM eventually. And when we got to the ESM discussion, we were concerned, obviously, about adoption and change management and all those sorts of things. The technology for us was obvious, and the sort of this whole premise of no code and how simple it is to use was very obvious, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee adoption. And so we brought some people together, we brought some leaders together, talked to them about their pain points and all these things. And it was so interesting because it was this sort of slow burn of people showing up. And more people started showing up to the conversation. Because originally we thought, well, it's an obvious HR thing. It's sort of obvious for facilities for us because they're heavy, they get loads of requests. But then legal showed up. The procurement people showed up. Our marketing department showed up to the discussion. So it was almost like a word of mouth kind of thing started happening where it became sort of obvious to the larger business community that, hey, this could be a solution to lots of problems across our agency. And, HR has been a real role model in this for us because they have taken it as they have lots of automated rules. They've really taken it sort of as far as it can go. And most of that has not involved us. They still seek our counsel for sort of design guidance or let's call it total cost of ownership. Like, is this, worth the squeeze? Should we make these kinds of changes or not? But generally speaking, it's self-managed. They're sort of running it by themselves, and they get high volumes. I mean, they do a lot of volume. So super successful for them and all the other groups.
So tell me this: how did how did marketing get interested, right? Or HR? How did that come to be where they're saying, you know what, we really need a better way? And how did that evolve?
Yeah, one of the things, the way the project started was really about ITSM. I mean, it was really, I'm the CIO, I'm really interested in all of the service management aspects of the IT organization. And when we started talking about that with the leadership team, and then introduced this idea of enterprise service management, people started asking questions. HR was one of the first that started asking questions about, so does that mean that I could better communicate where a particular request is at in the pipeline? Could I set up sort of service level agreements? They didn't realize that was the terminology at that point, but they were saying, could we establish sort of rules of engagement? Could users know where their request is at without our engagement, because they were taking tons and tons of calls of, where are we with this kind of thing? So that it just really started in is this what I think it is, and can it solve these problems? And obviously it does solve all those problems and many others. And then as they started asking questions and learning and hearing, lots of other parts of the organization started saying, I have all those same problems. I'm experiencing all of those same issues. Honestly, marketing and communication here is some of the most complex workflow we have, because there's lots of back and forth between the constituents and the marketing department. They have to do mock-ups, and there's all sorts of things that get sort of passed back and forth. So their workflow is probably the most complicated. But from a volume perspective, HR is by far our biggest user of the system.
Okay. And we find a lot of times, an organization is using maybe a proprietary system, or sometimes a system that IT built for them, or it's, an older system, or sometimes just email and spreadsheets, and they feel pain, and then they see another department managing a service request in a better way. So I think that's a kind of a common path. So we have another survey question that has to do with enterprise service management. And that's, is enterprise service management present in your organization? If so, how many groups outside of IT are using it? And I think one of the undercurrents here is that we find organizations that have lots of departments managing service on the platform are really trying to become more cost-effective, efficient, have a standard form of collaborating around work that flows through the organization. So let's give a moment here and see. You don't have to think about it too hard, just a rough estimate is good.
I want to make sure we call out something that Doug said earlier, and it's that just because it's shiny and pretty doesn't mean it's going to get adopted, right? And I think that you literally said that in one of your first opening statement there, Doug, in that this isn't just about standardization. It's your ability to have operational visibility, to scale your services for your constituents, and obviously have that level of control. I love what you opened up with. Just because it's shiny and pretty and new doesn't necessarily mean people are going to get in the car and want to drive it. You nailed some of those aspects at this real inflection point of how to get this level of buy-in from your own human beings that are in your own entity. And it's not so much a technology problem. It's really an organizational alignment problem. And you found a tool, Doug, that chips away at those issues, man.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point. All right, so really interesting. So it looks like the largest cohort is 1 or 2 groups outside of IT. So it seems like this might be an interesting topic for more than the typical, I think, webinar audience, this enterprise service management. I mean, given that, Doug, do you have any words of advice from lessons learned? The types of things, you don't have to explain it as, hey, I wish we hadn't done this. But what did you learn about the process, and what would you suggest to folks who are thinking about how do we help other parts of the organization manage service?
Yeah, so, it may sound obvious, but start now. Get this, for us, this has been such an amazing, it's covered so much ground in a number of aspects. One is we were trying to drive towards standardizing business process and, making sort of repeatable practice, and we're also thinking about sort of legacy, meaning as people come into the organization or people leave the organization, how sustainable are business processes and all those kinds of things. And for these service organizations, this solution has just covered so many of those issues because it's all documented. It's all sitting behind one single portal. It's just, it's one of those, the only regret I have is we should have done this sooner. That's the big regret. We could have benefited from this a number of years ago. And I wish we knew back then what I know now, because we would have done it much sooner.
I think that's great advice, and it's funny how that works sometimes.
Yeah.
You look back like, wow, I could have done this differently.
You got a whole lot of bumps and bruises under that blue shirt. I got you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple points here about enterprise service management. As you think about the components of enterprise service management, some things to think about as you're thinking about platforms. Just think about, hey, how easy is it to spin up a new department and really configure it, not code it for that group? How can we support their ability to mold that to their business with workflows and forms and automations? And then from a self-service perspective, you think about the knowledge customer portal with virtual service agents, things like that. One thing to think about is some departments we found, if they had maybe a part of the website, they didn't want to give that up. They didn't necessarily want to become part of the enterprise knowledge portal or service portal. And so what we had to do to adjust to that was build the ability so these groups could spin up their own self-service portal very easily, yet all that content could be part of the enterprise portal. It was more of a cultural change management than actual technology and functional needs. So that's just something I think to think about as you're thinking about how do we actually deploy something here. So the cultural change management process, some of this is really important there. And I think, Doug, you touched upon that, and Bill, with your comment about adoption, right? It's very much, hey, how do you lead the horse to water and have them drink it? So
And how do you get to more horses? I think it's a weird analogy. The one thing that we want to make sure we point out is from an experience perspective, the one thing, Doug, and you pointed this out, this type of architecture is known as a silent multiplier, right? So one portal, one IT architecture, clear request tracking. And what this ultimately leads to is people who are more efficient and ultimately are happier and more, oh my gosh, what's the word? Able to adopt these technologies and do something great with it. And especially now we start to introduce this architecture of low code or no code where these end users become agents of this change. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think I would add on to that is that one of the key adoption issues that many organizations run into is not from the service end, right? It's not the service provider, it's the service consumer's reactions or how difficult is this? And, I just used to call my favorite HR person, and now how is this going to work? And this could just get in my way. And what we have found is that has really enabled the service organizations to take this on, because the feedback that they're getting and the positive reaction that they're getting from I'll call them the consumers of services, because of visibility, because of simplicity. I mean, it's so simple to set some of these things up and get these requests flowing. it has helped and enabled the service organization because they don't feel like they have to fight that cultural battle. They don't have to convince the user community this is going to be a great thing. They just show them this is what it is, and here's what you can do with it. And the user community in our case, overwhelmingly, very positive feedback. So that helps a lot.
You know, so shifting gears a little bit, it's funny. I look at this slide and I think a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, we're talking about service management. So why are we talking about resource capacity planning, project prioritization, intake? The reason for that is that if you think about the services you offer, right, and an organization offers, deciding what services you want to change, right, what you want to replace or what new services you want to implement is very much a portfolio management and resource management exercise, right? We're talking about the programs and the projects that we're going to implement to affect those changes. And so a key part of a holistic service management or service operation strategy is this prioritization component and getting visibility into, do I have the capacity to do this? Do I have the budget to do this? How can we arrange these initiatives in a way that we can make it happen or justify the expense more often? You have executives saying, listen, we want to have our cake and eat it too. IT often needs a way to say, hey, you know what, these are great ideas. I would love to do them all, but in order to get them done when you want them done, we need either more resources or consultants or however you want to justify it. So, you know, Doug, do you want to talk a little bit about this part of the story, which I think is often overlooked within the context of service management?
Yeah, so for us, as I alluded to earlier, we started with the portfolio management components, and it is atypical. But one of the things that was in our favor, and one of the reasons that we did it the way we did it, was there was clear recognition that, as one of our executives here called it, it was a little bit like the Wild West, where, you know, the loudest voice and the, projects were making it into sort of execution mode, and people were surprised by that, didn't know it was happening. And obviously they're consuming resources, which means we didn't know that was happening. And it just starts to really, for us, the way we talked about it was, how do you bring the strategic plan, your strategic objectives into execution? And for us, that was happening, or was attempting to happen in this more chaotic, hectic environment of lots of projects all at once and different people and resource conflicts and all those kinds of things. And when we were able to, even the very first thing we did when we just put all the projects together and that visibility of what are we talking about in the way of resource allocation and consumption, it was, people, was just very eye-opening, and leadership almost immediately bought into the whole idea of, we got to get this under control. We've got to get real clear mechanisms for intake, sort of like a product development pipeline or something along those lines, where things have to move through gates. And, some think that can be very onerous. I mean, when you hear gates, you hear, oh, this is going to take a long time or whatever. We get project requests through the system really quickly. And a lot of that is to do with, we're all in one platform, we're all in one system, we're using sort of one set of data to have these discussions. And it's really been a game changer from executing against the strategic plan. And that's how we, I don't want to say won over, but that's how the executives got really excited and bought into this idea, was when they started seeing real movement against really important strategic priorities. They were much more willing to put other things aside. And they had visibility to that, and they could make those choices. So it's been a huge win. And it's not just about IT resources in our case, it's about all resources. When you're standing up some kind of a, let's say, new sales process, there's some consumption of IT resource in there, but there's really valuable resources that could be out on the street selling, and they're caught up in sort of these projects. And understanding that full resource load across all of these initiatives has just been a complete game changer for us.
And let me ask a question. You'd mentioned that often the loudest voice or the squeakiest wheel was getting the attention, which I think is a really common scenario without some of these tools. Were there cultural change issues you had to address with that? Was there any pushback, or did most of the leadership say, "Oh, okay, this is great, I totally get it"?
Well, one of the things that we introduced pretty early on was the whole idea of sort of value drivers. And what I mean by that, the simple version or the simple outcome of that is what I would call project scoring, where we say, look, how can you compare 20 different initiatives from a value perspective equally? Like one of them is a sales, I don't know, sales operation improvement versus a back office, efficiency initiative versus a risk mitigation strategy and security. How can you possibly compare those things? And so the scoring mechanism really took a lot of the opinion out of the equation, and it became, we don't completely rely on the scoring mechanism, and we don't completely let the numbers dictate our decisions. But it just became so obvious to people that they're like, you can't, right? When you add up these numbers and you're talking about sort of things like risk, like it's very, very high risk. The benefits are in efficiency and they're X number of hours, and the cost is 3 times that and whatever. It's really simple for people to just look at that and go, this is probably not one of those things that we want to invest in. And I think that once people get the visibility of the entire portfolio and can see that scoring across all initiatives, there's some that will still argue intangibles and these kinds of things. And, it's worth a conversation. But the scoring mechanisms, and we don't do this in a closet. We don't do this without everybody's visibility and seeing how it's all happening. Has really taken a lot of the noise out of it. And it was mostly like, okay, this is a better way to make business decisions. That's pretty much how it's gone.
I think that's a great approach. We've seen that to be very successful. And as I said, oftentimes we're talking about service management and discount what I consider the bow of the ship. That's what services are we offering? What are the technologies we're using to support them? And the other reason why I think service management has a vested interest with this is if an organization does implement new services on the wrong tech or for the wrong business problems, guess who's left supporting them? Everyone on this call and their teams. So I think that's a good way to think about it. So moving on to, I think, a really exciting topic is the impact that automation has had in the past, couple years, and now combined with AI, really accelerating. This is an area that our clients are spending a ton of time, and some research from actually Information Week, really fascinating. So IT service management especially spends a tremendous amount of time on tasks and activities that could be automated. This survey suggests that an IT person who's working in tier 1 or 2 is often spending 2 to 3 months a year on tasks that can be automated. And you see a list of some of those up there. We think about this as the toil. And 58% of the respondents had time allocations like this. The other thing that I think was really, really, really important was that 89% of the respondents said that this type of work is a type of work that contributes to attrition. And so I don't know about everyone on this call, but when good people who know your organization leave, that's incredibly painful. And so automation can play a huge role in this. if we think about time to value and the ability to automate, right? The impact of no code is so huge here. When you have a business idea, being able to take in a business idea and apply AI and automation to it very quickly and iterate without having to have software developers is critical. I mean, Doug, what have you seen the impact of no code in your organization look like?
Yeah, so there's I could give you literally 25 examples, but so some of the things that it allows is there are problems that we have had for years that we've just been, gosh, that's going to be monumental to figure all that out. And there's lots of business logic involved and et cetera, et cetera. And some of these things we have turned around. We started in contract management, I would say a month ago. It's running. It's giving us automatic alerts 3, 2, 1 month before contract renewals. All this was done by somebody who can barely spell ITSM. They look at the tool, the workflows are visual and drag and drop. And so that's one example. Another example is a lot of what you see at the bottom of this diagram, which is all of the integrations. And, I'm not speaking ill of other vendors, but lots of vendors talk about integration, and it means, yeah, we have an opening where you can feed some data, and that's the integration. Our experience, we are Intune, Microsoft Intune shop, and we needed to get all of our assets into the ITSM tool. And I know this sounds impossible, but I promise you it's real. It took us 10 minutes from the time we started the configuration to getting all the assets loaded into the system, because it just connected to Intune and just pulled all the data, and it landed in all the right places. Our assets were immediately available. And I've been around a while. I've been doing this about 40 years. I can remember the days where people sitting with spreadsheets, like pounding data into systems to get the assets right. And it's like painting a bridge. By the time they're done, it's wrong and they have to kind of start over again. So this kind of automation just brings a whole set of possibilities to light. And every opportunity we get, we're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example where, one of our goals and the place that we rest in the market is we're the best combination of capability and total cost of ownership. So things like pulling in all of your assets and then being able to actually use Intune immediately to take action. So your technicians from a record and team dynamics can take the top 20 actions in Intune without ever having to leave to go to Intune. Being able to do that really quickly is important because our customers are in the business of improving their business, not figuring out how to write all the scripts and the batches to make that kind of thing happen. That's what we're seeing. I mean, Bill, how about you? How are you seeing no code with AI and automation impact things? I mean, gone are the days where you had to spin up your own infrastructure and then go ahead and build your own vector database and go ahead and then instantiate an LLM and figure that out. And I mean, how have things progressed with no code, and what's the impact you're seeing?
I think Doug did a great job outlining kind of what he's seeing in the organization. And Andrew, you're really pointing out some really important things. And I actually want to kind of keep this relatively brief, but in terms of today's AI, I really do believe that we live in a world that just discovered oil, but hasn't invented the internal combustion engine. We got all this raw material. We're all just trying to figure out what to do with it. And I think beyond the implications to the business and the constituents and what you're running in, it's a mindset shift, right? It's this different mindset that you're starting to work with your people, right? It goes from we just need to power through the day and get through this queue to all of a sudden, Doug, you've got all those assets loaded. You're like, wait, why does this task exist in the first place? Why isn't it automated, right? And so all of a sudden, you're not everything's on fire. Not everything's a top priority. Not everything has to stay on this list, right? And so you're moving into this new era where your talent becomes much more strategic, right? Your people are focusing on meaningful problems. Your teams are becoming much more engaged. You're reducing things like burnout. And I think the scary thing is people think AI is going to replace you. It's not. In everything that we've done at my organization, what we've seen, we're just trying to give people something back that's truly finite. That's time, honestly. And when you start to take a look at low code and no code, and I really do, I want to impress this on everybody listening here. If you have a second or a chance, go to your favorite, GPT engine and just do some more research on it. But you're not asked to become a developer. You're not asked to become this coder or whatever. You're asked to become an agent of change for the organization, where you can become a champion effectively by being able to manipulate this architecture to automate exactly what you need to get done. In today's age, AI is a powerful tool when applied properly, and it can do extraordinary things for, I mean, Doug, you've got such an amazing use case, because you're not, a traditional enterprise or a business. You've got people you have to take care of, right? You've got some South Carolina, and you've got folks that report to you, and citizens that have to go and look at your services, right? So you're not just impacting folks within your own organization, but the people that look up to you every single day. So I think the services that you're being able delivering, the automations that you're putting in are ever so more important. But it's an operational effectiveness that you create around your own team members when they realize they have some more of the control over what they can automate and deliver.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. When we think about AI, there's so many applications for it. I think the good news is that, in spite of reading in the news regularly that AI initiatives aren't returning for big companies, and they're shutting down some AI initiatives within service management, there are tremendous use cases for it, where AI can take so much of that manual effort out and also increase customer satisfaction. When we think about AI, I think about AI and automation as just another tool to solve a business problem. And it's not the right tool for every business problem. It's just a new set of capabilities to address challenge. And, often, we ask the question, it's like, okay, well, the first is, could you use AI and or automation to address this problem? And then the second is, should you? And the should, I think, is really important. And usually there's one of my clients came up with a very simple rubric, and I loved it. It was, hey, if we automate this or use AI to address it, will it increase or at least have a net neutral effect on customer satisfaction? 2, will it make our team members' internality's lives easier or more complicated? 3, does it dramatically reduce or increase risk of some sort, and is there cost to it, right? And with those simple questions, it gives you some bearing on, yeah, let's invest in that, or you know what, let's not, probably not a great use for it. But when you think about a virtual service agent, and when we say virtual service agent, we're talking about a ability for a user or a system to converse to get something they need. That could be a chatbot on a website, or it could be through Teams. We think about it as multi-channel, but think about the ability to deflect tickets in a way where your customers are happier, or at least as happy, and your internal team members have a burden lifted off of them. So listed here are just a couple of common virtual support or virtual service agent activities that can be automated. Think about the things that take time. If you look at your ticketing history, you say, okay, what are the top 20 categories of things that consume our time and effort? From that list, I'm very confident you're going to find some things that, to fulfill that request, it's literally somebody clicking a mouse. Those are the opportunities where your customers don't want to wait on it and your people don't want to do it. So there's lots and lots of opportunities there. So, Doug, how do you look at this? What in your organization, what do you see as kind of the low-hanging fruit where kind of meets the could and should criteria?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I'm a member of the South Carolina AI Center of Excellence, and I helped write the strategic plan for the state on AI. So I have a lot to say about it, but I'll keep it brief. But the thing that we're finding is that there are these tasks that, and you've highlighted it, a couple of the sort of benefits. One is you're taking sort of very mundane, low level, little brain power required tasks off of the service organizations. And the thing that you have to think about there, it is retention, it's all those kinds of things, but it's also value for that dollar, right? Those people now are moving in. We've been able to take on more projects, more meaningful, substantial, we're sort of reimagining our sales process. We're taking on we have a very large project related to sort of augmented reality, where we're taking on all of these things. But part of the reason that we can do that is because we've taken some of these things off the table. And one of the things that does around retention, et cetera, is the skill set of the people you have naturally starts to increase. They're getting involved in much more sophisticated kinds of technology problems, and they love that. So much so that, our agency across the state is getting some attention for, hey, you probably want to work there. People are getting lots of good experiences and doing lots of interesting work. So it has a pretty big ripple effect on that side. But I would also say from the user community perspective, you have to think about things like 24/7, 365. And we have people all over the world. I mean, we have people in Tokyo, we have people everywhere. And so you also, some of these more sort of rudimentary tasks now are also easier for them. It makes it's sort of like a win-win. I don't know how you lose here. And there was initially some fear for, let's say, the IT community around, well, wait a minute, what am I going to be doing? But that quickly gets supplanted with, new projects and new work and new interesting problems to solve. So for us, we're kind of full steam ahead here. We're continually trying to figure out what things can get sort of more automated and places where we can use AI. But it does not everything. There are many things that still require that human interaction, and you do need some kind of decision rubric, like you talked about, to say, no, this is a high touch thing. You can't. You need that interaction.
Yeah, it's funny when we think about this from a product perspective. What we're thinking about is, all right, how do we enable customers, starting wherever they are from a maturity standpoint, to start transitioning those types of efforts that are could and should to AI and automation, and then improving the tools to help with the work that people fundamentally need to do, right? That they enjoy doing. So it's a really strange shift that's happened in the last 3 years, where we're saying, okay, what a typical user does in our system a year ago is going to be 50% different 2 years from now. And so how do you help people collaborate more effectively together around more complex types of requests, right? Or how do you make approvals easy, or those types of things? So it's a fascinating time. I mean, Bill, do you want to, we've talked a lot. Do you want to weigh in on some of the things Doug and I have just shared?
Yeah. It's I think one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in this industry, and for everybody listening, there's no going back. Every single person on this call right now is a user of generative AI. All of you. If you used Google or Bing, or if you're feeling extra feisty, Alta Vista or Ask Jeeves. By the way, you can't use either of those references in front of high school students because they don't know what either of those are. But all of you have effectively become users of generative AI. In this conversation specifically, to what Doug is talking about, and you obviously, Andrew, as well, we have globally dispersed people, right? Doing things that are way more valuable and in some cases way more high touch. There's nothing wrong with maintaining a human in the loop kind of an architecture for some of those more high touch types of scenarios. However, here's the big gold nugget. This thing that we're talking about, this AI, there's old school, your favorite chess game kind of thing, your car that drives you, great. And then there's this new stuff that we're talking about right now. And please see this as a practical layer that simply removes friction from both end users and the technician's day. And in terms of removing that friction, you know, Andrew, you said it best, right? It doesn't just deflect tickets; it accelerates resolutions, right? It gets people to a place of productivity faster, and there is an element of becoming more comfortable with this, especially when you start to see that these things aren't replacing people; they're giving you back time. And Doug, you talked about this in multiple different ways is terms of like we are finding ways for our people to stop putting out fires and start planting seeds for our business. How do we allow these very talented individuals to bring more value to this organization, right? In the past, historically, everything was so crazy manual, and we look at password resets, right? That is arguably every single time, Andrew, you do that survey that you do, it's either password resets or onboarding and offboarding. That's every time. That's what keeps coming up in terms of the top 2 or 3 things that people are most concerned about. But the manual aspect for people to want to pop the hood on this stuff and really understand it, you submit a ticket, you have to review it, somebody manually process it. There's a bunch of back and forth, and ultimately you lose something you can't get back, and that's time. With this type of architecture, whether it's new equipment, address changes, PTO balances, password resets, it's creating a much better architecture. And now we have this entry of a powerful AI system, this conversational interface. My gosh, this gets so much more exciting. A dynamic form inside a chat interface that allows you to become much more ingrained with the business, and you have a tool that is quite literally a part of your business as well, knows your processes, can do things with you, and allows you to do things much more instantly. I think it's action based, and we're seeing this technology being powered by really the amount of work that these end users are starting to handle, right? And the challenge is that their list of tasks isn't getting any smaller. It's not. It continues to grow and continues to become more complex. And Doug, and you too, Andrew, but Doug is laying down like a master class. Like, I work in government. Look at what we've been able to do successfully to get people to be more efficient and also to get our citizens to be happier with the services that we provide. I mean, like, that's like a double win, man.
Yeah, it's been I mean, for us, it's, I'm sorry, Andrew. For us, it's been,
no, go ahead.
I mean, it's like it's sort of an epiphany for us of opportunity. And I think what is so exciting about it for me is it's not, you know, one of the things that has happened historically in IT is, and we talk about things like password resets, and that's been going on for 20 years. But typically those solutions feel like to the user community, well, that's an IT problem, right? That's just something you're solving. And what's now true is these things look more like a business problem, because what they're starting to recognize is, oh, if you're not doing that, you can be solving this large business challenge that we have. So we are all on board and want to help make this happen. So for me, in the sort of arc of my career, that's the big change that the technology today is bringing about. It's becoming more of a business problem than an IT problem, and that's a major win.
Yep, I think that's a fabulous point as well. You know, looking at some of the results we're seeing from this sort of AI automation combination, our customers are seeing a 40-90% faster resolution time, which I think is pretty significant, right? If you think about the burden on your team, most teams that I know don't have a lot of extra time. So if we can shrink that time to resolve dramatically, I think that's really meaningful. The other thing we're seeing is 4 to 7 minutes on average saved per ticket. So you start adding all these things up, and it makes a meaningful difference. We're also seeing on the the virtual service agent side a 30 to 70% deflection. So you start stacking these types of numbers up. And if you just take your team and say, look, well, if I could deflect 30 to 70% of our tickets to self-service with virtual service agents, and then the tickets that do make it through, we can, save 4 to 7 minutes per or address them 40 to 90% faster. What kind of time does that free up to get to the queue faster, right? To spend more time with customers when they really need it. The result.
Nope. Did we lose Andrew?
I think we did.
Uh-oh. Well, I mean, as we get him back, we can just talk about the amount of time being saved, and I think we're almost about ready to queue up Kaylee here, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say
an amazing conversation. Kaylee, there you are. I can't do an Andrew Graff impression. I can't. I just tried. I failed miserably. We lost half of our attendees. I'm kidding. Andrew's really good at that.
You probably gained some. I'm guessing that the attention ratings went through the roof. No, my camera, the USB, I don't know if I breathe wrong on the USB plug, it disconnects. I should probably get a new one. But like most consumers of business technology, I sit here and struggle with it and get frustrated with it and, don't change it. So yeah, I guess what I was saying was, if you add all that up, and what our customers are seeing is that their internal folks are far happier because they're not spending their time on those repetitive answers, and they get to spend more time with the people who really need them. The customers of our customers reported much higher satisfaction because they said, look, when I request something I don't feel like I should have to wait for, I don't have to wait for it. But when I really need somebody's help or attention, they give it to me. Right? It's not multiple calls. So I think that's really important. I mean, Doug, have you seen similar types of results at the Department of Commerce?
Yeah. Absolutely. The emphasis on the deflect, I wouldn't, it's a thing, but it's only half of the equation, because the service end of it, the consumer end of it is also way better. I'll give you an example. So it was, I put in a ticket, it gets routed, it gets assigned, someone reaches out, they go in, they assign a license for a piece of software to someone. There's some kind of update of, oh wait, now we got to keep track of those licenses, as part of this contract, et cetera, et cetera. There's no IT people involved in that today. They're not involved in any way. People go in, they say, I need this piece of software. It routes a thing that says your manager has to kind of approve this. They approve it. They can download the software right then and there. It installs. For the most part, until we're sort of looking at licenses and paying attention to contracts and those things, we don't even know that's happening. And people love that. They literally, they feel like they've been given a gift, that we can just do this when we need it, and we don't have to get you involved. We don't have to wait. It can be at 8 o'clock at night. I can be in Germany. So it's just I would say it does free up resource on the provider side, but I would not at all undersell what the consumer of our services are benefiting from this. They love it. So.
I think that's a common result that we see. So transitioning a little bit, my colleague Kaylee is going to show you a demo. This is team dynamics, but the purpose isn't necessarily to show you team dynamics. The purpose is to take some of these concepts and give you a visual on them so that you can look at your inventory of tools and determine, hey, do we have tooling that we might be able to use for this, or help guide you with, hey, if we're going to select something new, here's some ideas. So Kaylee, go ahead. I know we've been talking, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andrew. And as my screen starts to show here, like Andrew said, I am just going to take the quickest flyby of what I can show you here from a visual perspective from Team Dynamics. We did not want to cut the discussion short between you all because it has been so good to hear the insights, especially from you, Doug. But let's just take a quick look, and then I know we'll save a minute or two for a couple of questions that have come in. What we're looking at right now is what we call our client portal. And so like Andrew and Doug were talking about earlier, we have a very flexible way to get end users into their support channels. So the client portal, like you see here, is one of those options. One of the things that Andrew had mentioned earlier is that when you think about having a single instance of Team Dynamics across the entire enterprise, whether you need a single one-stop shop portal like you just saw a moment ago, or you want to have multiple different portals, you're able to easily spin those up within that single instance of Team Dynamics for the enterprise. Now, when we think about some of the multi-channel type functionality to be able to get people into those support channels, we mentioned our virtual service agent. And so having portals like this is great, right? Having things like landing pages, Doug was talking about their marketing team, right? On their portal, they can have a landing page specifically around marketing and link to requests or link to dashboards to give information about where projects stand or ticket statuses stand. But portals can only do so much and take you so far. And so you want to couple that and meet your end users where they're at. And so you'll notice here, I've got one of our support channels for the virtual service agent, and that is our web chat channel. And so I can come in and do things like add me to a group, right? Reset my password, that mundane toil that Doug and Andrew and Bill have been talking about, being able to automate utilizing that natural language interpretation of what that end user is asking for. And then through Team Dynamics, very uniquely in this space, we then have that ability to have that enterprise integration automation layer that Doug was talking about, that they're able to rapidly expand out their integration options across their entire tech stack, built right on into the virtual service agent. And so you'll notice in live time, it's querying Active Directory, bringing back some groups for that user. But it's not even just about being able to do that through the web chat channel. The majority of our customers lately are so keen on our Teams channel because everyone's used to living in Teams right now. And so being able to do that exact same instant service where I can ask to be added to a group. If we don't need to have prior approval, we just want to go ahead and automate that and log a ticket in the back end to make sure we have a record of it. Great, we're able to do so. And so with that, it was just the quickest flyby that I could possibly have done at Team Dynamics, but I wanted to show just a couple of those highlights of the things that we had been talking about between Doug and Andrew and Bill. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass back on over to Peter and team, and we're going to go ahead and dig into a couple of the questions that have come in.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. Yeah, I guess we have time for one question. We're getting up toward the top of the hour. So we do have a question. We were talking earlier about integration, and there is a question about that. So let's go to that one. Can you integrate with any system? If we're using this for ESM, for example, we need to integrate with Workday. Can you help us with that?
Kaylee, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So the good news is that, like Andrew was mentioning earlier, we view integrations in sort of two camps. You've got your out-of-the-box integrations that are great when you need simple setup. Like, for example, Doug mentioning it taking, 10 minutes to use our Intune integration to be able to synchronize those assets. Just crazy. That's my first time hearing that, Doug. My mouth dropped open. I'm glad my camera was off. And the other camp that we think of is through the enterprise integration automation option. And so with Team Dynamics, we have a enterprise scale leading industry platform that has the ability to be able to integrate to any modern solution that has API endpoints. We've got a SQL database we can hook into, Oracle database, we've got PowerShell scripts. We have so many different options for being able to integrate, whether it be a SaaS solution or if you have something on premise.
Yeah, and we have a very robust Workday connector in the integration automation layer. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. And out of the box connector layer that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of integration options that are all just baked right on in.
Yes.
Hey, Doug, can I ask a super quick, 20-second question? Because I'm so curious about this. In like 1 or 2 sentences, how did you get user buy-in to start working on this technology and create champions on the inside?
Showing them product, showing them the capabilities, demonstrating what would be true, showing them one single integrated portal, showing them the kind of feedback that they get. It wasn't a lot of selling going on. It was mostly, once they saw it, they were, sign us up.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, folks. I want to thank you very much. That was a great presentation, but we've run out of time somehow. And I'd like to thank our sponsor, Team Dynamics, as well as everyone out there in the audience. We certainly appreciate your attention and participation. Within the next 24 hours, you'll receive a personalized follow-up email. It will contain details and a link to today's presentation on demand. If you have colleagues or peers who didn't join us today, let them know they can check out this event on demand. This webinar is copyright 2026 by Informa Tech Target. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Information Week and Team Dynamics. The individual speakers solely responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of our sponsor, Team Dynamics, and the Information Week team, I'm Peter Krass. Thanks everyone for your time. Have a great rest of your day.